Hi everyone, welcome back to another AuthorTube Real Talk. Usually I do these by my bedside table when I'm at home, but I currently am not there right now. So we're doing this outside. How is NaNoWriMo going for everybody? Because for me, it's not going. Honestly, I have not done as much as I wanted to. Generally, I think of myself as a pretty confident writer. Obviously, confidence isn't something that is finite. It definitely changes as I published more and as I sort of came into my writing style. I really developed a certain confidence with my writing. I don't mind sharing my work. I think that my writing is consistently good. I remember when I was 15, 16, I would just sit at my document and be like, how can I write a good piece of writing for more than a sentence or a paragraph? Something happened to me in June that made my writing process completely different than what it had been. Despite my confidence, of course, like I said, there were ebbs and flows, and a major ebb and flow for me was my novel Feeding Habits, which I still haven't finished. So I had been struggling with liking that book because I just felt like an imposter writing it. I didn't feel like it was good. Every single time I would read it, I'd be like, this is genuinely bad. And then a couple of months later, I'd come back to the parts I thought were genuinely bad and I'd read them and they'd be perfectly fine. And so this kept happening until about June, when one day, it was evening, I opened the document and I read, and I felt this sense of anger. And it wasn't at the writing, it wasn't at the process, but it was deeply at myself. I was really mad that I'd ever spoken so badly about my writing, that I'd ever felt so poorly about myself when it came to my skill, because what I'd read was good. At that moment, I realized I didn't deserve like the negative self-talk that I'd really been giving myself in the year and a half I'd been writing Feeding Habits, because it deserved a lot of love and it deserved celebration because the writing was great and I liked it. Now, I don't know exactly why, but something changed in me when I made that realization. And from then on, it's only been a couple of months, just about half a year, where I've basically committed to not being cruel to myself when it comes to my writing. So when I write something I'm not happy with, I just kind of brush it off now, where before it was very difficult to do that. And, I give that advice all the time. Like, it's okay. Like, writing is not a linear progression. Some days are not going to be your day, or some years are not going to be your years. And I give the advice all the time, but it's very hard to stick to. And I realized up until that point that I had not been very nice to myself when it came to my opinions about my own work. I'd been posting the Feeding Habits chapters on this YouTube channel, and people were loving it. They really liked it. I was getting tons of compliments and great feedback on the writing, but at one point, I just became debilitated by, I think, posting and sharing those chapters, not because I didn't want to and not because anybody said anything to me, but because I was at a point in my writing where I was just not confident at all. Like, I think I'd lost any sense of confidence that I'd built over the last 2 years or so. It really impacted my mental health when writing wasn't going the way I'd wanted to, or up to the standards that I'd sort of accidentally set for myself. With that said, from then I began a real journey of self-love and healing. And I had started writing Seventh Virtue, which is the contemporary fantasy novel that I'm working on right now, which is so different from Feeding Habits despite following the same characters, because it really focuses on my joy. And that's why in recent months, I've really been advocating for prioritizing your joy as a writer, because it can be so easy, like it was for me in the year and a half I'd been drafting Feeding Habits, to get into this black hole that you can't escape out of because you're so unhappy with your writing, or you're unhappy with what other people will think of your writing. I started my semester, so back in September, off pretty strong and pretty confident, because I had spent basically the summer developing my confidence even more back to kind of where it was, not a level of ego. Obviously, I think sometimes with confidence comes ego, but I think my confidence before, like in first year, was mostly ego. It wasn't actually sustainable confidence. So with that said, I started on a journey of kind of actual confidence. It is currently now raining, so hopefully it's not too loud, but I started my semester off strong. It started in September. I submitted a story to workshop, and I was happy with it. I did well on the story. I was confident in it. I knew I was going to do well on it. And that's something that that I've started to like develop. I've been writing for about 7.5 years now consistently. So since I was 12 years old in grade 7, and now I'm in my third year of university. And as I've gotten further into my writing career, I've found it's gotten easier for me to tell whether or not my writing is good or whether or not it needs more work. And obviously that's very subjective terms that I'm talking in, good and bad writing, but just take with that what you will. I've developed a sense of, do I need to work on this more, or is it okay? And I knew that the story I handed in for workshop was relatively okay, needed a little bit of work in some areas, but then I started a story for another class I was taking on short fiction, and it was about in early October that I realized something was not right with my writing process and that I was feeling extremely burnt out. So if you didn't know, in late August or so, I was diagnosed as autistic. This was kind of a surprise for me, something that I had been pursuing for very short term. If you didn't know, me and mental health have been very complicated. And so when I found that out, a lot of things sort of clicked in place. So in July and August, I experienced a bit of a meltdown, and I didn't really understand where it came from. With research later, I understood it was because I am autistic, and I'd spent so much energy and time sort of masking my whole life away, and it caught up to me. And I think this meltdown coincided with a giant chunk of burnout. One of my special interests is my book, Fostered. So I've been writing Fostered since I was 13. You could probably see my face change. Like, I just light up when I talk about that book. And with that said, I'd been writing a lot of it very consistently. So I started Feeding Habits in April of 2020, and from there I wrote it pretty much all the time. I did take some breaks. Basically, I just was working on it frequently for about a year. Then I started Seventh Virtue, and I wrote like almost 50,000 words of Seventh Virtue from May to August, and that was a lot for me. I don't usually produce that quickly anymore. I had also created a goal for 2021 to write a short story every single month. So sometimes the short stories are microfiction, so maybe 300 words and under, 500 words and under. Sometimes it's flash fiction, but most of the time it was full-fledged short fiction. So between, like, let's say 1,200 to 2,500 words, or a little bit more, a little bit less. So it was quite a lot of writing that I've been doing. I love the goal. I think it was a fantastic thing for me. But in October for this class, when I needed to draft another short story, I realized, holy shit, I can't do this anymore. 2020, 2021 were extremely rigorous in terms of how much writing I completed. And I truly wasn't prepared for what having to write a new story from scratch that was going to be graded and be my midterm was going to do to me. And I ended up writing it, but for the first time in a year, because I've been drafting short fiction monthly for a year, I felt extremely burnt out, and I did not feel confident in the story. I was like, I can't do this. And I think I've been feeling this writing burnout since about August. It's been very difficult for me to wrap my head around because, writing is obviously like a special interest of mine when it comes to like Fostered at the very least. And it's something that I love very much. It is one of my passions. So for it to be difficult to do, it kind of fucks with my mental health just a little bit. This time around, I wasn't feeling too upset about it. I was just feeling like, oh God, how am I going to do this? And that was the first red flag. It's been a couple of weeks later, and I'm working on another story for my second round of workshop. And I literally couldn't write something new. I was feeling so down that I couldn't do it anymore. And it's because I think I've been writing kind of nonstop for about 2 years. And I didn't really notice that it was taking a toll on me. And honestly, I think being a writing major is difficult because in any other occasion, I probably wouldn't have written for the entire semester. But being a writing major, you have to write. And I like it for that reason. But I think this term, I was like, I'm feeling the burnout, especially coming off of the pandemic. I'm away from home. There's a lot of emotional stuff that I just have to work through. And on top of that, having to write is not easy. So that leads us to NaNoWriMo. And I love NaNoWriMo. I haven't completed it. I've never won. I wasn't sure if I would do it this year because I knew I was really struggling with my semester. It's just been a lot for me to handle. I'm exhausted, I think, from the last year of online school and the pandemic and the emotional turmoil. And if you were in Toronto, you know that there was that stay-at-home order for like 7 months where like nobody left their house. And so, just trying to grapple with all of those things emotionally as well as creatively has been a struggle. With that said, I was like, okay, I'll do NaNoWriMo, but we're going to do it for Seventh Virtue. And I knew I didn't have expectations for myself coming in. I made a video about it. I will link it. It was my most recent video on my plans for NaNoWriMo. I just wanted to write a little bit, maybe 5,000 words or something over the month. And that's it. I had been doing some Preptober because I wanted to add points of view to Seventh Virtue, just because I wanted to see what Reeve and Lonan were up to in the book, and we didn't get to see that in Harrison's head. But I noticed in October that I just hadn't have any time to Preptober like I had wanted to, and it ended up being October 31st, Halloween, and it was very, very late at night, 11:30 after I'd finished all of my schoolwork. And I've been doing better to not have late hours like this, but this was one day where I had late hours, and I was Preptobering half an hour before NaNoWriMo started, and I wasn't prepared like as much as I'd wanted to. I didn't do what I had hoped to do, and so NaNoWriMo started off on a bit of a slippery slope. So November 1st comes around. I wrote quite a bit. I wrote over the amount that I was supposed to. I think I wrote like 1,800 words that day. And now it's the 9th of November, and I still have not written anything since that first day. And I don't know. I was talking about confidence in the beginning because this has been really difficult to wrap my head around. I think I obviously didn't have expectations of myself going in, but I guess I kind of did, because when the second day happened and I didn't have any time, I was really busy with school. To do any writing, I felt super disappointed. It's not like I felt disappointed in myself. I didn't. I just felt disappointed that things hadn't gone the way that I had hoped that they would have gone. I had genuinely wanted to write every day and keep up the 1667 words or whatever it is every day, because I hadn't written Seventh Virtue very frequently since I started school. I've been writing stuff for school and I miss the project, For me, it doesn't feel like I'm oriented when I'm not working on Fostered, because it's a huge part of my life. It's a huge interest. And it's like taking something away that you love for like 4 months because you're busy with school. Like, I'm sure everyone can imagine that's kind of disorienting, or at least it is for me. And I just really wanted to work on it. And I know I was really disappointed on that second day. And I was like, okay, it's fine. I will just catch up tomorrow. And then tomorrow came, and the next day came, and the next day came. I didn't do anything, and I'm not sure how much I will be able to do. Not only is it school, not only is it burnout, not only is it confidence, it's all of these things combined. And I haven't felt this way like in a long time. And I was reading a short story that I'd written, I think in July or maybe June, I think it was July, called What Leaves Her. And it's one of my favorite short stories I've ever written. And I was reading it yesterday because I just didn't feel like myself when I was writing, because I have to write a new story for workshop, right? So I was reading my old work, and this was pretty recent too, July, right? And I was sitting there, and I turned to my sister and I was like, I just don't feel like the person who wrote that anymore. And I don't mean for it to sound sad, but it is kind of making me a little emotional, because I think I'm just so tired that I don't understand who that writer was, even though that was me just a couple of months ago. And I didn't think that I still dealt with imposter syndrome, especially after what had happened in June with me and feeding habits and realizing I'm not going to be an asshole to myself anymore. But then I realized this is not something I can control. It's not something that I want, but it is something that is happening, and I have to deal with it now. Because I was reading it, I was like, how did I write that? How did I know what to do? How did I feel empowered and excited to write all of that stuff? I think a lot of students know it's very difficult to do NaNoWriMo during November, because that's kind of when everything is due. And so I knew that going into it, but it doesn't stop me from feeling disappointed, a little miffed, and a little bit I don't really know who I am right now as a writer. I know that sounds a little bit silly because it's going to pass, but I don't know, especially yesterday, I was struggling. But the good news is yesterday, I ended up writing pretty quickly some new content that I was really happy with. And I think in the pandemic, it's just tricky to feel excited and like you're ready to just do whatever you want, because we haven't been able to do that for a long time. Burnout is like a real thing that I would love to hear more thoughts on. If you've been burned out, how does that feel for you? Because I didn't notice my burnout until it was like too late, because I'd still been creating in the times that I was burnt out, because it didn't really feel like it was burning me out by any means. But at this point, I don't know if I can write. I feel like I've been written out. Like I was at a get together with a couple of friends from my program, and I know a couple of days before I was talking to my sister, I repeated this to the group. I was like, if I didn't write ever again for the rest of my life after today, like I wouldn't care. And obviously that's not true, but it's just speaking to the true exhaustion that I think is now hitting me. So what I think I need to do is just take a break for a while. I can't right now because I'm a student and I have to write for school. But when that's over, I think I deserve a break. I've been writing consistently for 2 years. And because of that, I don't know how much NaNoWriMo I'm going to do. If I feel super excited to write one day, like I'm writing a chapter in Lonan's head right now, and I'm really excited to write in Reeve's head, I might write. I'm not going to stop myself. I also don't want to make myself feel inadequate, because I feel like I felt that way enough. And so I'm kind of in a place of acceptance, like, okay, like I accept I'm feeling this way right now, but I'm going to rest so that in the future I can sort of come back with fresh eyes. So it's raining pretty hard now, so I'm gonna go. I hope that this video was relatable to you on some kind, but that's a bit of a NaNoWriMo update and also like an AuthorTube Real Talk update about how I've genuinely been feeling about my writing. Let me know how writing has been going for you. I hope it's been going well, but if it isn't, talk to me in the comments. But I hope that this video was helpful in some way or that you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye.